All right, here we are with another Lightning Ventures founder interview. I am lucky today to be speaking, with Alexandre Roubaud. Now, I don't know if I said that right. Hopefully, he can correct me.
Close
He
enough.
did I say it right?
Close it. We will say close enough. That's good. That's good.
Close enough. All right, Alexander is the founder and CEO of Bitstack. Um, and we've had a few firsts lately at the Lightning Ventures group here. This is our first ever YCombinator alumni. And this is also the only Bitcoin only company that was in this most recent cohort, that being summer 22. Um, Alexander has a history of working in the roundup space, which maybe we can talk about. He worked for another previous startup that does roundups, and we all know Acorns here, which I believe is a unicorn and possibly SPACing or just SPACed. And they built a whole business around rounding up your extra spare change in purchases to buy equities and other things. Really cool, interesting company. So, first off, Alexander, how are you today? Where are you calling from? And let's start with that.
Cool. Well, thanks, Mike. Yeah, doing great. Doing great. Calling from Paris, France. So that's where our company is based. That's where our offices are. My co-founder and I just flew in back. So if I look a bit tired, we just flew back from San Francisco. We're just wrapping up the Y Combinator batch, but we're now back in Paris. So everything's going great, and happy to chat about a bit our background, the roundup model, what we've seen work, what we've seen doesn't work, and what we're building at Bitstack. So let me know how you want to structure this.
All right. Well, the first question I want to ask, since I haven't got a chance to ask it, and I'm sure you have to answer it in a very careful way. Um, did YC live up to your expectations as a founder? And on a scale of 1 to 10 thus far, how helpful have they been to you?
It lives up to the expectation. Obviously, the expectations are high. There's a lot of things that are said about whether YC is helpful or not. Coming just out of it, I would give it a 10. The reason is the following. First and foremost, what people sometimes forget is that YC's kind of like help is lifetime. So we just went through the batch. I'll speak a bit about what they do during the batch, but even in a post-batch life, you get the YC community, you get the YC brand, you get the YC tool and software for life. And this is extremely underrated because as you build this company, as you hire, as you do, XYZ challenges that you come across, YC is there alongside you the whole journey. In fact, YC has different programs that just don't stop at the batch we just did. They have what they call post-continuity programs. They actually can follow invest on your following rounds, etc. So YC is not just there. It's not just a one-time thing. I'll mention three key things for us that were really kind of the things that's not surprised me, but like were really the thing that made the whole difference for us. One is just the support you get from your group partners. So obviously what's pretty interesting, I guess I'll give that context, is that we were the second only batch ever to receive $500,000 from YC. And this is pretty interesting because the thesis from YC is that as liquidity is tightening in the market and as investors are kind of overall pulling away, YC thesis is that they want to give their founders an unfair advantage. And they do that by giving them more cash. So, kind of as a surprise to everyone, since the last batch, so winter 2022 and S22, which is ours, we've been receiving $500,000 from YC. So that's the first thing that's pretty cool, and just kind of highlights how YC is thinking a bit differently than everyone else. But like I was saying, the group partners are just an amazing help on a daily basis. So you meet with your group partners as many times as you want. We've had the chance to work with people like Michael Sable and others, and they just understand what works at our stage. And that's what's really kind of the difference with YC is like, how do you understand the strategy you need to build pre-product market fit? And what are the strategies that work post-product market fit? And a lot of the advice you'll see on the internet is just what to do post product market fit. People will tell you to hire, people will tell you to do, you know, scale this, scale that, and then people just end up burning cash and just killing themselves. And YC has this very like strict guidelines on like, here's what you should focus on as founders, pre-product market fit, don't hire. Sometimes they're being a bit controversial on that. Founders first led strategies on growth, on product, etc. So that's been really remarkable, I found, for me, and really changed our mindset for my co-founder and I. And then you get access to all the tools. I won't go into all the details, but people think YC is just the group partners and the day-to-day. But in fact, in the last 10 years, they've been building software and tooling around the YC community. So you get access to a whole directory of alumni, of investors. You get, I work at a startup hiring tool that they've built internally. They vet candidates for you as well. There's a bunch of deals, discounts on thousands of softwares. And I must be missing a lot of stuff. But essentially, they've been building stuff for us to make building a startup as easy as possible. So yeah, that's pretty much the highlights for me. Been really living up the expectation that I had.
All right. So you heard that here. Okay. Pre-product market fit. Don't hire. Okay. That is great. We are completely in alignment with that. And it's funny how many really early stage entrepreneurs and founders, they come up with an idea and they build a domain name and they think the first thing they need to do is raise $2.5 million and hire a CFO and then hire a bunch of people to build it. So completely aligned with YC on that one. All right, very cool. So let's talk about why you decided to start this company and the need that it fills. And did kind of the idea come from your time at your previous company, which I'm not sure how to say it. To be honest with you, I never heard of it, but I know that they're in a roundup industry. And is it MoCA or MaCA?
MoCA, yeah. It's MoCA, but I can give the backstory. I think I'll go a bit even further back in time to explain how kind of Bitstack came together. My co-founder and I are both McGill grads. So I'm now back in Paris, France. I'm originally from France, but I actually spent the last 7 to 8 years in Canada. There's actually a great Bitcoin community in Canada, so I won't go into the details, but that's where I fell into the Bitcoin rabbit hole, essentially. Via the hardcore Bitcoin meetups there. But my co-founder and I were both McGill grads. So we're both in Montreal. I was in business school. He was in engineering school. And we were both working on Bitcoin. So this was back in 2015. So like we're students from 2014 to 2017. So that's when we were working on Bitcoin. My co-founder started the first Bitcoin blockchain club at McGill. And I was building software for Bitcoin, essentially tools like proof of reserves, proof of ownership, to help, and for some reason I ended up working with these guys, but working with audit firms like KPMG, EY, and risk firms like Aon to help them understand the risks related to custody of Bitcoin. So my co-founder and I had this common interest. He was organizing events on campus. I was working on Bitcoin with some other friends. And so we met that way, we became friends, and the relationship started from there. Fast forward a few years, we both graduated, and we weren't, it wasn't obvious at the time, unfortunately, that we were going to pursue a career in Bitcoin. So we thought we were going to go and do the next best thing. For my co-founder, that was, being a software engineer, first at Bombardier and then some other companies. And for me, it was to work in early stage consumer fintech. So I joined this company called MoCA to lead product for them. So I joined them after the first round. We grew to over 200,000 users, raised an A, launched internationally in Europe. And essentially, MoCA was the Canadian play of Acorns. And so this is why you mentioned, Mike, earlier, where the roundups model comes from. So very familiar with Acorns. MoCA was the Canadian play of Acorns, help people round up their everyday purchases, invest their spare change into ETFs of stocks, bonds, and cash equivalents. And in end of 2020, the company was acquired by a publicly traded neobank in Canada called Mogo. And so, it had been, so things were going in my mind. I was like, what's going to be the next move for me? And it had been in parallel a few years that when I was looking back in Europe and my friends and family, I wanted to help them get started in Bitcoin. Like every Bitcoin person, trying to orange pill my friends. And I thought there was really no low barrier to entry solution, kind of what I like to call a low risk, low effort solution for them to get started. And so this, when it clicked, and I thought we could use the roundup model purely as a customer acquisition hook to say, hey, we'll actually, in a low risk, low effort way, get you started. You don't have to do anything. You'll plug your bank accounts. Every time you'll spend, which happens to be pretty nice because people like to spend, and they already do that. And then we'll invest the spare change for you in Bitcoin. And that just allows us to create this Bitcoin account for them, this Bitcoin wallet, get them to fund that wallet without them realizing it. And then you get them in the space and they get exposed to it. And then they start understanding what Bitcoin represents. And then you can talk to them about Bitcoin. And so purely the roundup model for us is a wedge into the market, is to say, hey, how can we acquire users, as efficiently as possible? How can we crack the distribution piece of really the mass market that we believe so strongly about, which is kind of that next wave of adoption? Taking away the first 10%, I think that's kind of the numbers we see in Europe. But how do we go into the 50% that are showing intent to get started into Bitcoin, but really never made the first step? So that's the backstory of Bitstack. A mix of like falling into the Bitcoin rabbit hole during my time at McGill, then working for consumer fintech and kind of bridging the gap between the two. That's how we came through.
All right, cool. So let's start with the product. Let's start with what is live now, when it went live, where is it live right now? And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about your strategy with regulatory and how you're differentiating from a lot of other things that are out there. But as of right now, okay, without the roadmap, let's get into that separately in a little bit on all the fun and exciting things, okay, that are to come. But as far as the product right now, what is it simply, and where is it live?
Yeah, so today, Bitstack is a very simple and clear value prop. You link your bank accounts and we'll round up your everyday purchases and invest the spare change in Bitcoin. So it's live in France and some other markets. I'll speak about it a bit after. But in those markets, you'll be able to link any European bank accounts that people bank with. And then every time we'll spend, we'll get to invest their spare change in Bitcoin. Now, this is how most of our users get started. But they can already today do more. So once people get started with the roundups, what we tend to see is that users then start doing two things. One, they start adding recurring buys because they now feel more comfortable and they want to kind of save even more in Bitcoin. So people can set daily, weekly, or monthly recurring buys of the amount of their choice. And then people can do one-time buys. So people will still like to smash buy every now and then. And so that's really how our users use the product today. We have an average savings or transaction volume amount per user per month of 100 to give everyone listening an idea. So the average Bitstack user is transacting 100 euros in Bitcoin every month. And then the user has two options. They can, or three, if you will. They can either leave their Bitcoin at Bitstack, so that would be a hosted custodial wallet, or they can decide to withdraw their Bitcoin to any external wallet of their choice, or at any point in time, they can instantly sell their Bitcoin, get their euros back into their bank account. So that's the product today.
Okay. And that started 5 months ago.
And that started 5 months ago. So I guess I'll give a few numbers here. And I get and let me know, but after we can also speak about why France first and what other markets we're going after. But 5 months ago we started with the first beta of the app mid-March. Since the last 5 months, end of August, recorded 3.3 thousand active users. Our users are saving over 300,000 euros every month in Bitcoin. So that represents what I mentioned, that 100 euros on average savings basket, call it, per user per month. And we're growing 30% month over month. So we're pretty excited about that. That's the growth we've hit in July. That's the growth we've hit in August. And that's the growth we're hitting for September. So that's the growth we've seen over the last 5 months. I'll speak a bit about why France, because I think that there's an interesting insight to share here. When I look back and I close the loop with the story I was sharing earlier, like end of 2020, we're quitting our jobs respectively, my co-founder and I. Actually, Europe passed a new wave of regulation in Europe on what they called crypto asset service providers. And so this is interesting because prior to end of 2020, there was no regulation for any wallet, exchanges, on-ramps, off-ramps. The whole space was unregulated. And in the post end of 2020 world, you now had to be categorized as a crypto asset service provider in each jurisdiction in the EU plus the UK. And that meant that you had to follow a certain set of rules around KYC, around anti-money laundering, all the good stuff, from financial institutions and financial product and services. So my co-founder and I had two thoughts in our head. The first one was, okay, first option, we avoid regulation, like some people choose to do. We'll set up operations in either Switzerland and Malta or somewhere else. But then we realized that if we wanted to build a mass market product, really kind of flood the average consumer and flood the market that way, win the category in Europe, it had to be a regulated play. We had to make regulation our bread and butter. We had to tackle it head first. And not only that, we had to be one of the first to be regulated in each jurisdiction. So that's the strategy we decided to go for. And precisely we chose France because France happened to be the country that led the conversation with the European Commission on what that regulatory framework or standard should be across the EU. And they created actually one of the most rigorous regulatory frameworks out of each country. So very simply, the idea was, let's do the hardest one first, if you will. Like we'll do France because France is the hardest. And from a strategy where we'll have to go to these other markets in the EU, the marginal cost of going from France to Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, or any other country will be smaller than the opposite. Because we'll have kind of the highest standards and compliance standpoint by respecting France's regulatory framework and going from there. So that's why we start with France. We're registered in France. We were one of the first few companies to be registered there. So that allows us to do all the good customer acquisition in France. And we're already in the process to be registered in Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, and the UK, because that's our strategy from a regulatory first approach.
Those damn French, always so difficult. Leading the conversation for the EU, and I've read a number of those stories as well about the impending crackdowns that are coming to from now to 2025.
That's correct. Maybe I can share it just because you mentioned it. That's, I guess, that's part two of that insight, if you will, because this year, in fact, it was voted. This was a very, very closely watched and anticipated discussion. It's called MiCA. So it's going to be market and crypto assets. And this is a EU-wide standardized license that they voted on that will be effective in 2025. That's the tentative effective date, which will be nice for one reason. There's one pro and one con. The pro is that you'll now have one license to operate all of the EU. The con is that it's a pretty heavy crackdown, and maybe a lot of people listening will have heard it from the basis that at some point they included in the law that Bitcoin would be, or like proof of work assets, crypto assets would be banned or would be, cracked down on. Thankfully, it's been removed, but that's why a lot of people heard about it. But anyways, all this to say, the interesting insight is that all the work we're doing today at Bitstack is in anticipation of that set of regulations so that we can be one of the first to passport our existing regulation to MiCA when it comes in 2025 and have kind of this really aggressive approach to our European go-to-market. So that's the way we're thinking about it.
So just to recap that, traction so far, at least as of a month or so ago, was 3,500 or so users with an average 30% month-over-month growth rate. And do you have a top line number for September? I mean, we have a day left. Are you above that? You said roughly 330 before.
Yeah. So in September, we're almost at 4,000. We're hitting close to the 4,000 active user mark. 400,000 savings in transaction volume for the month. So
that 100 per user is pretty consistent then.
It is. In fact, we're on the latest cohorts, we're starting to see even 110, but that will, we'll see the consequences of that over the next few weeks. But yeah, it's pretty consistent.
Okay, now I'm not a YC expert, okay, but I've invested in plenty of YC other deals in the past, okay. So when I came across this, and it was a roundup product for Bitcoin, that is not really what YC would invest in. That is not a company that they would accept. They go for really big ideas. So the first time I talked to Alexander, I said, "What's the deal?" And he said, "It's all under wraps, Muzzman. We can't tell you about it just yet, but you're onto something. That's not something that YC does." So let's go into the roadmap for some future products. And I don't think anything here is proprietary, at least as we discussed before. And some of these other features that are going to be coming to Bitstack, I can go through them, or I can let you just touch on each of them if you'd like.
Yeah, no, I can give the rundown of it. And I guess I can share, I don't know if I should, but I can share why YC took us in as an insight. There's two reasons they took us in. Obviously there's a lot around the team, but that's just standard across the YC companies. But there's two things specifically that I liked. One is that our numbers were showing that we had, there was signal that we managed to crack distribution for that wider set of less sophisticated users. Because what we're pretty excited about at Bitstack is that over 60% of our users today are reporting to be first-time Bitcoin buyers. And that's interesting for us because we didn't want to end up in a space that we felt was very difficult to navigate, which was if we were selling to existing Bitcoin users, to be in a space where there's a lot of Bitcoin existing solutions for kind of the Bitcoin, the average Bitcoiner, if you want to call it that way. And so if we're managing to really lower the barriers to entry and target that first kind of Bitcoiner, that first-time Bitcoin buyer, that's exciting for us because we're their first entry point into the market, and we're therefore their first and only Bitcoin wallet or Bitcoin account, and that allows us to upsell them. So that's kind of why I was giving that context, because we can now, the user is like kind of turning to us to say, okay, now I feel more comfortable. Now I've dipped the toes in Bitcoin. What's next? Like, what can I do? Can I save more? Can I transact with my Bitcoin? Can I, monetize them, or like, can I pay? Whatever is next. So that's what they thought was an interesting insight. And second of all, from a European standpoint, we talked about it, so I won't repeat it. But they liked that as kind of a two-man team at the time, we had tackled the regulation head first. Like, this is something they don't see often. Is like, regulation is it's pretty hefty work. It's people tend to avoid it, unfortunately. But in the EU, it's kind of you have to play with those rules. And the fact that we had tackled it head first, that's something they thought was interesting. So that's how we got in. Obviously, the big play behind is interesting because our wedge into the market, like our European go-to-market, is call it a Bitcoin savings product, a Bitcoin savings app. The reason, again, being that savings in Europe, people have to understand that in Europe, people don't trade. There's big social and cultural differences in how we save and invest in Europe. We're not like North Americans. We don't like trade and invest a lot because mostly the retirement system is completely different. We don't have to invest and build up our nest egg for retirement. It's provided supposedly for the government. That's another discussion for another time. But so people just save in low interest bank savings accounts. And so our whole wedge was like, we have to build a savings product. We have to wrap Bitcoin as a savings product because people are not going to trade and speculate on Bitcoin, and really make it low risk, low effort, as I mentioned earlier. Now, one of the second products we're building is the first Bitcoin cashback program that will work directly on your existing bank transactions. So what does that mean? That means that today already our users have linked their bank accounts to be able to round up their everyday purchases. And because they've linked their bank accounts, we can now work with partnered brands, call it Burger King, Starbucks, all of the favorite brands, of European consumers, and tell these brands, hey, we actually know if your consumer, if our customer is already a customer of your brand, or if they're shopping at your competitors. And so we can reward our customers just by having plugged their bank account to Bitstack. So that's pretty neat because our users don't have to use our own like Visa debit card. They don't have to make their purchases in app. They can just link their bank account to Bitstack, shop like they do every day with their existing bank card, and will be able to reward their Bitcoins on their everyday spend at their favorite brands. And the reason these are two key pieces is because once we end up with that savings, product and their cashback product, essentially what we've built is a savings engine and a cashback engine that we will use ourselves to power our Visa debit card. So we're working today with the Visa team over in Europe because we think there's a pretty big opportunity to issue our own Visa debit card that will allow the average consumer to spend euros because the tax framework in Europe is not incentivized for you to spend Bitcoin. There's a 30% flat tax rate, so I don't think people will spend Bitcoin, at least today. But they'll spend euros, and that's what the average consumer does already with their existing cards. But that card will be packed of Bitcoin rewards. So you'll have instant roundups on the card, ways to save money from the card in Bitcoin every time you spend, kind of supercharged cashback on the card every time you transact. And that's how we're really going to upsell to become the primary bank account of the user. Again, with that fully powered by this Bitcoin kind of native experience. And so that's how we're moving slowly from simple, clear value prop that helps us crack the distribution to really that kind of power user product and Bitstack becoming that kind of the user's neobank on a daily basis that's fully powered by Bitcoin. So I gave the the transition and how we're going from there. And obviously around that experience, we're building other products like the Pay Me in Bitcoin that I think a lot of people will be familiar with from other products in the US. So people can set up a direct deposit, get their employer's paycheck directly in Bitstack and choose a percentage of it to be converted into Bitcoin, and then peer-to-peer payments with your friends or cross-border remittances in Bitcoin or fiat. So that's essentially what we're building right now as we speak under the hood that will roll out in 2023.
Okay, so the peer-to-peer payments. Now we're talking about Bitcoin, or we're talking about fiat, or we're talking about both. How does that peer-to-peer payments look?
Yeah, that's the piece I'm pretty excited about because people ask the question and I like to say both. And the way it's working is because a lot of our thesis is that we see Bitcoin as kind of this existing payment protocol, and the existing payment rails or bank rails as the other, and like two different worlds that we're really essentially connecting in Bitstack as one. And why that's interesting is because we can imagine a world where, let's say, Mike, you hold Bitcoin, you only want to receive Bitcoin from your friends. I owe you money from pizza last night, but I'm the average consumer. I'm not that much into Bitcoin, so I'll send you euros, and you'll receive Bitcoin. Or I can send you Bitcoin, you'll receive Bitcoin, or I'll send you euros, you'll receive euros. But we can then connect those two payment rails and via our infrastructure really make them completely interchangeable directly in the app. So that's the idea is people like to pay their friends, send money cross-border, and we can either leverage the Bitcoin kind of payment rail or protocol or the existing fiat kind of euro payment rail and make them completely interchangeable via Bitstack. So that's really the idea.
And this is what we call real Bitcoin, right? This isn't a derivative product, which
this is real Bitcoin.
It's unfortunate with PayPal and Venmo, and somebody owes you $50 or something for dinner last night. It would be nice to just click that button to buy Bitcoin on the spot, but you realize you're not actually buying Bitcoin. Okay, so just maybe really quickly, Bitcoin-backed loans. It's a little controversial with everything that happened recently. Is this an idea, or is there maybe 10 seconds of something you want to just touch on with the Bitcoin-backed loans?
Yeah. Very quickly, this is the most further down kind of the exploratory route. So it's not something we're actively building to be transparent. So we're really building what I mentioned, the savings engine, the cashback engine, and how we help that power our Visa debit card that we're issuing. The Bitcoin-backed loans is an idea of how can we help our users that will by then have stacked some Bitcoin and they'll now start holding a significant amount of Bitcoin in their savings, and they now want to either have a credit line against their Bitcoin or spend euros and kind of avoid either the tax implications, or they just want to hold Bitcoin for the future because it continues to appreciate in value. So I think we like the underlying values on like, how do we allow the user to continue spending and not have to sell their Bitcoin and continue saving in Bitcoin with essentially euro as your checking account and Bitcoin as your savings account. It can take the form of Bitcoin-backed loans or some other kind of Bitcoin-backed credit lines, but we have to explore more. So that'll be something we'll be kind of watching closely and discussing over the next few months.
So let's recap just a few things that were said here. Bitstack has a unique strategy where they're focusing on the hardest regulated markets first. And for those of you who don't know, what most Bitcoin or I guess crypto companies do is they use this Swiss incorporation, and it basically allows them to kind of backdoor into a number of countries. And Bitstack believes that this is a smarter strategy long term, and that some of those loopholes may be soon to close. They're also building I know I hate the word, but what else is there? It's a neobank type of strategy where they're going to incorporate plenty of these fiat tools, right, to get people on board who might be what we call pre-coiners or new coiners. And they are sending payments back and forth. It can be just as convenient as a lot of these other apps. Maybe they decide to turn on the roundup feature. Maybe they start seeing some of that NGU technology that has currently been on pause, and they become Bitcoin enthusiasts. So that is what's going on with that. Real quickly, so this is a great usage of the card-linked offers that I haven't seen. For those of you who don't know, the EU is not like the US. In the US, the merchants get screwed with a lot of times north of 3%, just gone in the interchange. That's how they can give you all of this cash back, right? 1.5% here, 2% there, airline mails, a free mattress, whatever they do is because of the way that the US is with the incredible costs to merchants. The EU has that capped at 50 basis points. It's a 0.5%. No matter where you swipe, which is pretty convenient when you're in Europe. And no matter how small your bill is, the merchant doesn't care. They just swipe it. And in America, it's a $10 minimum on cards and all these other things. So the ability to link your card with Bitstack and then get those 10% off at Wendy's or, name a company, whatever you're going to. We have that here in the US, but it's like super inconvenient. Oh, if I look in Revolut, maybe I can get X% cash back in Uber. If I, use this company, I can get 4%. So it's really cool that that's just going to work and you don't even have to think about it. And you can just get those cash backs. It's a very creative way with a thin margin in the EU to do that. So question for you, can you link more than one card to your Bitstack account?
Yes. The short answer is yes. You can link as many bank accounts, which will include the cards to Bitstack. So you can link as many as you want.
Okay, so let's get into a couple of questions, right? I think we're doing pretty good here. Hopefully we can wrap it up soon. I don't want to take all day. So, all right, let's start with this. I'm sure you get this one every other day. Plans for markets outside the EU. Will Bitstack be coming to the US, or are there any other expansions beyond EU? And by the way, there's a lot of freaking people in the EU, okay? So if that is their focus, is getting regulated in 40 countries properly, that is enough to tackle. But that is the first question I have for you.
Yeah, I was you stole my line. I was gonna say people forget that the EU is actually a bigger market than the US. If you take the whole EU, including the UK, call it, because the UK is no longer in the EU. There's north of 400 million people in the EU, so that's why we're starting there. It has its own challenges and its own execution play. So that's our focus. That's our go-to market. We're starting with France. We're flooding the EU. We're making sure we're becoming the go-to product for the EU for Bitcoin. And then from there, there's interesting conversations. We've actually had some already interesting conversations with either countries in the GCC area, so whether that's things like the UAE. We're looking pretty closely at what's happening in Africa as well, also because geographically we're not too far away. There's pretty strong ties with some North African countries. And the US is something we're looking at, but I'll be honest with everyone listening, the EU is a pretty tough play, just like the US is on its own. It would be unwise for us to tackle them both too early, because it's just a different game. The foundations are different from like the partners we work with. Not to say we cannot go, but it's all about focus and priorities. So we're starting with the EU. Once we become the leader in the EU, we'll already be $1 billion company. I can guarantee that. So the question is just, what's next? The US is definitely interesting.
Okay. So this question is, how does Bitstack compare with RoundlyX? This is not in the competitive slide. Do you view them as a competitor? As far as the competitive slide in the deck, which is not downloadable from Lightning Ventures for everyone who happens to be in our syndicate to review our deal memo, because we care about confidentiality and we want everyone to please keep our reputation flawless in that. The deck does not have specific competitors. It lists categories like banks and exchanges and other things. So I'm not sure if everyone here knows about RoundlyX, but it's pretty much, it is certainly a crypto company. They are not a Bitcoin company. So Alexander, have you heard of RoundlyX, and what do you say about that?
I'm familiar with it. I'm not a user because it's US based, if I'm not mistaken. It's not available in the EU. So that's the short answer, essentially, is RoundlyX is not available in the EU. The reason being regulatory, obviously, as usual for the EU. We like to regulate things here, unfortunately or fortunately. And so that's our play. It's like, how can we create a local regulated kind of trustworthy brand so we can be the go-to consumer brand in Europe? And that's how we differentiate to a RoundlyX. Probably the model is similar, I assume, if it's a round-up solution. Like Mike mentioned, obviously we're Bitcoin only. I like to think that gives us a kind of focus and execution that's different, just because we know what we're working on and we know the value prop of what Bitcoin can do. But yeah, that's essentially the big difference. I guess I'll segue into, because that's probably the underlying question, is just competition overall and how we're thinking through that. The EU had this interesting kind of landscape because, again, regulation, but I'll leave that there. In the pre-2020 world, it was a bit kind of the Wild West, no real local entity. Funny enough, a fun fact for everyone, if you ask in the EU, like, what's the go-to kind of like Bitcoin purchase app, like, you'll never get the same answer once, because there's really no one positioned themselves like maybe either Cash App, Coinbase, or maybe now Swan Bitcoin and some others have in the US. So we really felt there was an opportunity to position yourself as kind of the leader in the category. And we think that the way to do that in the EU is via that savings approach. The other two alternatives, and this is why we mapped it that way, is either exchanges, which are international players like the Coinbase of the world, the Binance of the world, that are unregulated or were unregulated at the time. Now Binance is actually, interestingly enough, going the regulation route, but we're deserving the European market. The problem with those is that my friends and my family, like the pre-coiners, they're not too big of a fan of opening an exchange account. Again, people in Europe don't trade that much, so already that's kind of a big barrier to entry. Like being presented with 1,000+ crypto assets and having that really psychological barrier of having to make an upfront commitment. So the experience is like, you're on your bank portal, you're going to wire money to your exchange accounts, and then you're going to have to like place a trade and cross finger that your trade is going up. That's not really how we crack mass market here. And so really the savings approach with a very simple and clear value prop around Bitcoin was how we're cracking it. The neobanks are interesting. We have all the classic neobanks, the Revoluts. The problem with those fintechs, is like that's the big challenge in fintech. The cost of acquiring a customer is through the roof. So a Revolut will, to give an idea of people listening, will have over an 80 euro or $80, it's the same these days, $80, call it CAC, so cost of customer acquisition. The reason being is because their pitch is the switching cost of their pitch is pretty high. They'll tell people, hey, you're banking at BNP Paribas or whichever big European bank, leave that bank and come bank with us. And we think there was this kind of like niche angle we could have, which was like, hey, like we don't ask you to switch bank. Like there's still millions of people in Europe who are like banking at traditional banks. We can directly allow you to get to buy Bitcoin from your bank account, from your existing bank account. And that's how we crack distribution. And crack the hardest piece of fintech is like how to get the user to fund their wallet for the first time. Once we do that, it's a much easier game to upsell the user and present them with other financial products and services. So that's in a nutshell the competition landscape.
So by enabling the roundup feature, you're funding their wallet right off the bat and you're getting them rolling.
Exactly.
Okay, and you mean to tell me people are confused when they sign up for an exchange and there's 1,000 different cryptos that they can buy instead of just Bitcoin? I can't even imagine. I mean, it was confusing in 2013. It's got to be ridiculous now. Okay, so I got 3 more questions and we're going to wrap it up. All right, the Bitstack deck says crypto everywhere. Why not specify Bitcoin? You gotta love our group for this question. Is Bitstack going to start shitcoining? I love it. That is a real class question there. That is great.
It's a good one. It's a good one. I like it. Well, short answer is no. We're fully dedicated to being Bitcoin only. In fact, fun fact, if people read our first ever blog post that I wrote, it was kind of the testament we've made to be Bitcoin only and build 100% Bitcoin only financial products and services or solutions. So people can go, fact check me on that one on the blog post. So short answer is no. The only reason there's mentions of crypto is that, we don't get to speak to Bitcoin only investors every day, unfortunately. I wish, fun fact, that, there was more Bitcoin only investors out there, but there aren't. So that's just a way for us to simplify very broadly as we went into fundraising recently. But we're Bitcoin only. I invite people to look at our website, look at our app. There's not a single mention of crypto there, and that's what's important for us. It's how people use us on a daily basis. So, short answer, no.
All right, very cool. Moving on. I can't use Bitstack because I am from the US. Is it an app only, or is there desktop logins as well?
We say we're mobile, so we're mobile only for sure today. The long-term vision is we'll always be mobile first, and that's because that's where we see the highest penetration from a mass market distribution standpoint. So short answer, no desktop version today. Will there ever be a desktop version? Maybe. Our users will tell us that. If people want a desktop version, we'll build it. It hasn't been really highly requested feature, in fact. So we haven't. And it's not in the US because we're not available in the US. We're available in, I think, if I'm not mistaken, last I checked, 15 markets in the EU, with 95% plus of our user base being in France, because that's where we market today. And as we tackle the regulatory kind of hurdles in other markets, then we'll market more aggressively there.
Okay, we usually keep valuations and things and numbers out of this, but it's hard to keep it out of it when you put it at the top of your website there. Bitstack raises $1 million. Learn more. I'm not sure if there are listed investors here or if that's something that we can talk about as well.
Yeah, I can give this was our first ever round of fundraising. So this is going to be different than this round. But this was our first ever round. So we raised this in end of 2021. We communicated on it early 22. And this was the first round we ever raised to go to markets, essentially. So we had built the product, we had obtained the regulatory approval in France, and we went to investors and said, hey, we're on the starting blocks, we're ready to go. Let's partner up. and let's launch this. And so that's what we did. And so today we're raising again after the kind of the growth we're seeing, all the the product building we've done. So it's two different things, just to be super clear. This is our first raise, it's been closed. Maybe the interesting piece is that our existing investors on that round are participating again in this round, which is always something as founders we're happy to see. But then we're bringing a whole other set of investors on this round, including YC, for example.
Okay, cool. And I only have one more question for you. Out of the upcoming services, or I'm sorry, features that you're planning for the roadmap, which is the next one? What is going to be first?
Yeah. So today we have this roundup app. You can buy, you can sell, you can do recurring buys. We have this Bitcoin savings app. We're rolling out, and maybe I shouldn't say exactly in details, but before the end of the year, we'll be rolling out the Bitcoin cashback program. We have over 40 plus partnered brands, so we're pretty excited about that, just out of the box that we'll have. And we'll be working really hard to bring everyone's others' favorite brands over time. But that will be rolled out before the end of the year. So people, sometime in November or December, people will be able to just earn Bitcoin cashback when they spend, and they won't even realize it, essentially. That's how powerful it'll be.
Very cool. Okay, and finally, what are you most excited about on your roadmap? What is something that that motivates you and keeps you excited about the future for Bitstack? And that could be the month-to-month consistent growth. That could be some things that you can't mention here, but it could be the growth of the Lightning Network. It could be that you finally get to work with Lightning Ventures, and we're going to be awesome partners and champion you all the way to the end. What is something that you're excited about?
As you ask the questions, I'm running through all the things I'm excited about, and I'm trying to pick which one. But obviously we're bringing a lot of exciting investors that understand, the consumer space for us is what we get us excited, because consumer is this hate-love relationship where, it's a very hard space to navigate, because, consumer is hard to execute on. But there's also this really extremely rewarding piece of, having million plus or millions of users using your product on a daily basis. So that's what gets me motivated. If via our product we can orange pill millions of people, that's obviously the goal. That's why we started Bitstack. I wanted to get my friends and family started. But I'll mention one thing. So a bunch of things that get me excited, but I'll mention one thing very specifically to Bitstack that we see, and that was kind of a testament of our execution, is that we track something called a weekly retention cohorts. So we look on a given weekly cohort of people signing up on Bitstack. We'll say, okay, week 1, all these users, there are X number of users that are saving, that 100 euros a month. In fact, it's broken down by week, so 25 a week. After how many months, are they still actively saving with Bitstack? Because if they just come, save, and they're not very excited about Bitcoin or about the app, that, we're not really delivering on our value prop. And what we realized, and, a bit of caveat, we're still early, so play devil's advocate there, but our oldest cohorts are 90 days plus old, so 3 months plus old, and we still have 75% retention, meaning that out of all the people that are signing up in this cohorts that are activating, their roundups or their recurring buys of Bitcoin, over 75% of them 3 months plus later are still saving that 100 euros a month. And for us, that's, retention is kind of our go-to key metric. So we're really excited about that.
Over 75% retention. That is awesome. Okay. We're excited about Bitstack. I am too, and this is right in our wheelhouse with Lightning Ventures. We're invested in other payment companies, other sort of savings type of companies all over the globe, not just here in the US, but in other markets. And this is really awesome. And we're lucky to be investing. And there's some killer co-investors in this round that we can't talk about here, but if you are in our group, you can read all about them. And I just want to say, hey, thanks, Alexander, for coming on and doing a lightning round for some questions and hanging out today.
Thanks to you, Mike. It was a pleasure.
Cheers.